Oh my gosh. Tempo, Grandin, I
Hello.
spoke with you earlier today. I want you to know that I am so pleased to have you here. We all are.
Well, it's great to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome to Table for Five with No Reservations. Take a seat at the table for a fresh, sweet, salty, tart, and pleasantly bitter conversation.
Thank you for taking a seat at the table. Tonight, we have a super special guest. Temple Grandin is with us tonight to discuss all things autism, and we cannot believe it. Seated at the table with me this evening is Jamie Ramos.
Hello.
Tabitha Cabrera. Hello. Kim McIsaac.
Hi.
Jennifer Dunn.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Rachel Flanagan, and we've got Temple Grandin. Amazing. Well, I wanted to just take a moment to introduce, although I know all of our listeners probably know you so well, but Temple is a professor, an incredible inventor, a visual thinker. She is a best-selling author, and she is just an incredible asset to not only the autism community, but also animal sciences and just so much. But a hero at our table indeed. Thanks for being here, Temple.
Well, it's really good to be here.
Thank
A lot
you.
of things to talk about tonight.
One of the things that all of our children have in common is such incredible sensory need. And I know you've spoken so beautifully about your experience. I wondered if we could start there.
Well, when loud sounds went off suddenly, I just hated. I hated balloons popping and things like this. You never knew when they were going to pop. And one of the things that's learned now about some of these sensory things, like certain loud noises, is if the child can control it. I should have been allowed to pop balloons, gradually making them bigger. Another kid got over a fear of vacuum cleaners by letting a child turn that vacuum cleaner on and off, where they control that noise. But sensory problems are real. And sometimes sensory issues can trigger a meltdown. It's because it's just sensory overload. That's likely might happen in the middle of a noisy Walmart. There's just too much stimulation. But I want to tell you a few things about wearing earphones. If you wear them all the time, the brain gets more sensitive. It will make the hearing sensitivity worse. Now, it's okay to have them with you all the time. That gives you control. Have them with you. Put them on for the really horrible things, like some of these dreadful bathrooms with all these flushers and hand dryers. That's a place where you can put them on, but then other times get them off, because I've heard stories where the child was wearing headphones so much that even very quiet conversation in the home turned into sensory overload. You see, and it is possible to do some desensitization if the child can control the noise. Now, if it's something like dogs barking, I can't control that, you'd have to use recording, and it has to be a real high quality recording that the child could control the volume and control it.
I think that element of control is so interesting, because when you bring a tool into play, you don't want it to become your baseline. And so it's interesting to hear about it in terms of headphones, because we use so many tools for my daughter, and I feel like often then it becomes the baseline if it's too frequent. So I appreciate hearing.
Well, and then the other thing, I still have problems with hearing when there's a lot of background noise. I still have a problem with that. And when I was a little kid and the grown-ups talked fast, it went to gibberish. So with a lot of these individuals, slow down when you talk to them. The other thing is, give them time to respond. Like phone with 1 bar of service, it's going to take time to download the web page. It's like you click too many times on the computer, then it tries to open it up 5 times and it just makes it worse.
Right.
You got to give up time to respond. That's another little hint. And then on visual sensitivity, some individuals can see flicker on fluorescent lights. And that's really bad. Fluorescent lights, but also on LED lights. Now, this doesn't bother everybody, but you know how you can find the really bad LED lights? Take pictures with your phone in slow motion video. And I'd wave like this because I want to make sure I play it back in slow motion. And you can find the really dreadful LED lights that way. See, this is where sensory issues are very variable. They're extremely variable. So that's just a few little hints. And then I couldn't stand being hugged. And one of the things I did with the squeezing machine, see, I could control the squeezing machine. And I actually used that to desensitize myself.
My daughter Celie has, she's 8. She has your book, The Girl Who Sees in Pictures, or a book about you. And she said, after speaking with you this morning or this afternoon, she goes, Mom, will you ask Temple what to do when you don't have a hug machine around?
Well, there's other things you can do. You can get under, sofa cushions and things like this. Weighted blankets, weighted vests, things like this can be helpful.
My son loves to be squeezed, like especially
Yeah.
if he's overstimulated.
Temple, may I ask, what does that pressure do for you?
Well,
How does it
seems to
help you?
calm down the nervous system is what it seems to do. Now, some individuals respond to deep pressure and others don't. This is where sensory issues are very, very variable. But the whole nervous system is sort of revved up to be a lot more kind of hyper responsive. And
Thank
then scratchy clothes.
Mm.
I wash any clothing goes against my skin, I wash first and need to find things that don't scratch. I find like certain Levi's itch and others don't. Same thing with khakis. Some itch, some don't. And it just has to do with how they do the weave. So I have to find pants that don't itch. I've had really good luck with Walmart, and I have found they last.
Yeah, they wash well.
You buy the trendy ones, they don't last.
Yeah.
My daughter learned from you that if you leave a button a little looser or get a different size, that you can still find
Well,
your way through certain
well,
things.
that's right. You see, I've heard a real sad case where a kid got fired from a bookstore because he wouldn't wear a tie. Well, come on now, you get the collar loose enough, you don't even
Yeah.
feel the tie.
Do as Temple does.
Yeah, I mean that you don't want to lose a job over that.
Right.
There's things you can do to solve that problem.
One of the things that we find we balance sensory input for my daughter for is to sort of keep her from getting so escalated that we get into a place of meltdown, which I feel like for her, and I know for all of our kids, really, it's hard to come back to full strength after.
Well, it takes a while to recover from that. What's triggering a meltdown? Is it sensory? The other thing that can trigger a meltdown, and it's often not given enough credit, is frustration because you cannot communicate.
Yes.
It's
Yes,
horrible.
for-
And I can remember that frustration.
And how old, because my daughter's 4 and she's nonverbal. She uses an AAC device.
Because she has something to communicate.
What age do you remember that
Well, I
frustration?
can remember like I was maybe 4,
Okay.
3. I was very young, but it was very, very frustrating. I remember on my very first book, Emergence, I don't want to wear this hat, so I chucked it out the window of the car and mother made me go get it. And not being able to communicate, horribly frustrating. Got to give them a way to communicate.
And do you think,
Essential.
do you have any tips? I know devices and
Well, it
packs
can be
might,
the simplest thing, even a picture board.
Okay.
Something. Picture exchange. That's simple.
yeah. Yeah.
It can be the simplest thing, but you've got to have a way to communicate needs. Like maybe you're thirsty, you have to use the bathroom. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just basic needs. You're cold, you're hot,
Yeah. And sometimes we my daughter's frustration has increased as her age has increased, which is, understandable with her understanding language. But we do a lot of guessing. Like today, she didn't want to put on pants, and I'm sure it's because she didn't like the texture of the pants or the feel of the pants. And so I finally went and got a skirt from the drawer, and she
Okay.
ended up putting that on, and it worked fine. And
but
it's
you
kind
give
of
her a choice, pants
Yeah.
or a skirt.
yeah, we
In
gave
other
her a
words,
choice.
give a limited choice.
Yeah, it seems to help a lot. The choices help a lot with the
Have a
frustration.
choice. You can wear this shirt or that shirt.
Yeah.
Give some limited choices, and that can really make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially with the clothes or preferences. That's the hardest part, I think, for me and for her, is her preferences I don't fully understand, and so we're trying to guess between each other the communication.
Well, a lot of it is how things feel. See, now one
Yeah.
thing I had a problem with, like in the summertime, I'd wear shorts, and then when it was time in the wintertime to wear pants, I didn't like the way the pants felt. And
Mhm.
so what I've ended up doing is just wear long pants all the time.
Oh, to get
always
rid
good.
of the shorts.
Then it always feels the same way.
Oh, okay. That's
And
Interesting.
My good clothes and my work clothes all feel about the same.
Oh,
And
okay.
there's no transition, no season shift.
Good thing you moved to Montana.
Well, the other
Tess.
thing I do, I'll wear a lot of t-shirts under a lot of things.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
yeah.
do you have
That's
the
another
silk
thing that
near you or
helps.
the softer?
Yep, and there's some t-shirts itch, and the ones that are soft are the ones I keep. The ones that itch get given away.
Right down the line.
My daughter is
Temple-
very finicky with clothing. She's nonverbal and she's older, so it's really difficult because I let her pick stuff out, but then she doesn't, if they don't fit exactly,
Well, you
like,
give choice and you can try it on the store. The other thing that's gonna help a lot is washing everything that goes against the skin.
yeah,
That,
you know,
underwear, all underwear, I wash before I wear any underwear. I
oh,
broke
yeah.
out rashes when I did not wash it.
I call it Goldilocks because it has to be, you know, it can't be too loose, too tight. It's
That's
just
right.
very,
Well, and I found with some pants, I bought a pair of pants and after I washed them 3 times, then they were good.
yeah.
You know, that,
Keep softening them up.
there's something itches, like I gotta be on a plane for a long time and I've got pants that itch. That is just horrible.
That sounds horrible.
Take
It
the
really
plane to the Walmart. We gotta get a new pair of breeches.
The Walmart stuff was some of the stuff that was better,
does.
especially for pants. And I found they last.
Yeah, I
Bought
think
stuff at
that's
some of the trendy little stores and the stuff just wore out and like the pants got all ripped up really quickly.
Listen, I
Yeah.
have to say, as a mom whose daughter dresses up to look like Temple Grandin with the, she's got an agate bolero thing that she wears.
Okay.
Y-
Oh,
You
good.
get to wear whatever you'd like with whatever you'd like. You are a thing in your own, Temple. Just fantastic. I know that you work so hard to advocate for your experience and for kids like ours. And I know that you speak at lots of conferences and
Yes, I do.
you know, I can imagine that you have certain things that you like to share with parents. Is there anything that you'd like?
Well, where I'm seeing big problems now is making the transition to adulthood. We're
Yep.
doing a much better job with the younger kids. I'm seeing too many fully verbal kids that get so overprotected, they're not learning stuff like shopping.
Mhm.
They're not doing chores. They're not learning work skills. That's something that needs to start around 11 with volunteer jobs, like a church volunteer job or a farmer's market volunteer job, where somebody outside the home is the boss.
Yeah, and
That's
work them.
really, really important. But I'm seeing some parents that just can't let go when I suggested their kids should go in a store and learn how to talk to the store staff and buy something. This is where we really got some problems. And then I have grandfathers that come up to me all the time. They find out they're autistic when the kids get diagnosed.
Yeah.
And where autism diagnosis helps later in life is with relationships.
Oh yeah.
That's where it's helpful. But in my new book, Visual Thinking, I talk a lot about jobs for people that are neurodiverse, whether they're autistic, dyslexic, and I'm an object visualizer that has a lot of problems with math. So the kinds of stuff I'm good at would be animals, photography, art, and mechanics.
Yeah.
Art and mechanics actually go together. Then you have the kid on the spectrum who's a math genius. That's the pattern thinker, music and math patterns. And then you'll have the autistic person that loves history, loves facts about, football players or whatever their favorite thing is. And when looking at jobs, of course, your mathematicians, things like computer programming, and then some of these kids that are real smart in math, they need to be moved ahead and not be doing baby math because that's just going to cause a behavior problem.
Right. Boredom.
Going back to younger children real quick, and I'm not quoting you, I just see quotes from you certain places.
Okay.
About you said something when you were younger, your mom always took you out to try things, to always go out and try them because
Well,
you have to
Mother
expose.
had a very good sense of how to stretch me. I'm seeing too many of these kids not learning basic skills, things like money. The other thing is, in my generation, social skills were taught in a much more structured way. Like, well, okay, we'd be sit down for dinner. And if, let's say, I took my drink and I stirred it with my finger, Mother didn't scream no. She'd say, use the spoon. She'd give the instruction. I call that teachable moments. That was a standard 1950s way of bringing kids up. And grown-ups corrected kids, no matter where little kids went, especially little kids. I get touched too much stuff in the store, the clerks would say, only touch the things you're going to buy.
Yeah, constant coaching, right?
Yeah, you see that, but that's, and there's way too much time on devices. We got to get kids off these devices and get them doing other things. That's why I did books like these 2 books, Calling All Minds and The Outdoor Scientist. All kinds of projects that kids can do outside. And kids actually love doing these things.
Oh yeah. My
One of
kids,
the biggest things the schools did that was wrong was taking out hands-on classes. Worst thing the schools ever did.
my kids love being outside and in nature, especially my daughter. She loves touching nature. She loves being in water and being outdoors, and it actually regulates her body, I found, and her being to be out playing with sand or dirt or all of those things.
Well, I did all those things when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Under your auntie's ranch.
But where we're really having problems is a transfer to work, because
Yeah.
I worked with big metalworking shops where I'm sure the person that ran that shop was autistic, and he owns a business and he patents stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what kind of makes me want to pull my hair out. So I've gone back and forth between the autism world and the industrial world.
Mhm.
The thing I learned since I was weird, I learned to show off my work. There's one of my drawings.
I love that.
I love it.
What I
Wow.
learned was to show a portfolio of my work.
Yes. Let
No,
that speak
show
for
my
you.
work rather than myself.
Love that.
Yeah.
But we need the kids that think differently.
I'm about ready to cry that you're real. We're really in your kitchen, and the Hubble space poster is
Yep,
behind
I
you.
put that up there on purpose. That was put there
Listen,
deliberately.
I know all about that Hubble space
Yeah.
thing. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about your love of that?
Well, and then the
particular?
James Webb stuff is even cooler.
Please tell us.
But the Hubble Space Telescope, one of the pictures that I really liked was the deep space field that has hundreds and hundreds of galaxies in it. Galaxies. Single most important picture the Hubble took. And I learned about the story behind that, and I wrote about the story behind it in my visual thinking book, that the scientist who did that wanted to take 10 days of precious observing time
Yeah.
to point the Hubble at nothing.
Yes.
And other people, some reviewers want to go, well, you can't waste the time doing that. But when he pointed it at nothing, he saw everything.
Everything.
I think that's so
That's
cool.
beautiful. I love
Beautiful.
And the nothing was right by the Big Dipper.
it. Mm.
And then if you learned this story
Well, I read about it.
before today, you should know that it really is on her fridge. It's real.
Well, this is true. And
Temple.
yet everybody else wanted to point the Hubble at some star or something that they could see easily. And
That
he
they
wanted
already
to point the
found.
Hubble into a dark, empty piece of space and let it observe for 10 days. And he found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of galaxies.
That's so
Galaxies, not
beautiful.
planets, galaxies.
It's
Mhm.
just so interesting. You know, that story resonated with me when I read it, because the unexpected is
Yeah.
exactly the life that my daughter has shown me. And
Mhm.
there's such a beauty and different and a different way about the way that my daughter processes with, you know, autism in conjunction to mental health. She also has brain damage issues, and her view is like nobody else's. And well, she's 8 years old, and we were introduced to you right at the same time as her autism diagnosis. I know that our way to get into her world is different because of you. And I know that that's true across all the moms on this table. You've rocked so much about what this community knows. And I just, oh my God, I cannot put into words how much you've changed my view and our path, because
Well,
my
thank
daughter's
you,
got dirty hands and dirty knees, and we are outside learning life.
Well, that's good. And the other thing, we have to just work on basic skills.
Yeah.
I remember a 12-year-old that came up to me at the airport with their mom, and the mom did too much talking for the kid. The kid's got to learn to do their own talking. And I found out that the girl had never shopped, fully verbal. I handed her a $5 bill and I said, go across that hallway, go in that store and buy something. And she came back with a drink and gave me the change.
Oh.
It was the first time she'd ever shopped by herself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were sitting in the gate and you could see the store. It was right there. It wasn't at the other end of the terminal. But I
Mhm.
have parents that are kind of afraid to do that, or like they're pumping gas, send a kid into the shop, buy a jug of milk, or just, buy something.
Mhm.
And I'm seeing kids where they haven't learned to order food in restaurants themselves because the mom will do it for them. No, this doesn't help the kid. They've got to learn how to do these things themselves.
Yeah, we focus on that a lot in our house. My daughter came into my bedroom the other day with 2 eggs in her hand. She's obsessed with eggs right now. She loves them. Uncooked eggs, and she was giggling up a storm, and I'm like, okay, let's go to the kitchen, let's put these in a pot, we're gonna cook this up
Let's
together.
cook them. Yeah, let's not
Yeah.
have a break in the bedroom.
Yeah, no, put them in the pot. But she helped me cook. She put the
Good,
spoon in the
good.
water, she scooped it out, cracked the eggs. She's 4, nonverbal. I mean, if you give
But
them an
she can-
opportunity,
But she can learn to do those.
yes, if you give
We
them
have
an
to start
opportunity.
looking at what they can do. what they can do. And a lot of nonverbals can do all kinds of stuff like cooking. And there's some that can learn to type. Give you a little hint. The print has to appear next to the keyboard. That's why an iPad works better than a desktop or a laptop. Because see, on this desktop, I got to look way down here at the keyboard. And then when I look up at the print, they can't make the attention shift. They cannot make the attention shift. So that's why an iPad works. And if you want to teach them on a desktop, you got to put the keyboard up on a box so that the print appears right next to the keyboard.
Interesting.
And they don't have to do this. Attention shift is a problem.
That makes sense.
Very, very simple thing.
Temple, I've been reading Visual Thinking, and like all your stuff, it has really helped my understanding of my son. I really like, you quote Dr. Zeman in there, who says, this is not a disorder as far as I could see. It's an intriguing variation in human experience. And I love how you quote him in this whole perspective, especially you talk a lot about like our public school system and how it's really, how you're talking about taking out these hands-on classes.
Well, that's the worst thing they ever did. Now, some states are starting to put it back in.
Yeah.
But I had a student in my class who'd never used a ruler. We've got kids growing up that have never used tools. I think this is just ridiculous.
In high school, so I failed out of calculus. I got there and I failed out, and they put me in like a business math class, and I learned how to.
And that makes sense. And that's what should be done with someone like me.
And they don't do that anymore.
Well, you see, that's a mistake. Business math is what that I need to have.
Right.
That I know how to do too.
Yeah.
But you see, the other thing is we're losing skills. Like, for example, poultry processing plant, pork processing plant, that equipment's all being made in Holland now. Well, that goes back to taking out those shop classes. You see, in Europe, Italy, you can choose in 9th grade to go university or go tech route. And they don't stick their nose up at the tech route. And I can tell you right now, the Italians make all kinds of food processing equipment that we don't make. And it goes back to taking out those classes.
So what can we do as parents to make sure we're implementing those things for our kids since the schools aren't?
Well, then you got to, do things. But we got kids that aren't doing scissors. That's why this book right here has got all kinds of little projects. When I did a book signing for this 4 years ago, I found out that 20 to 30% of the kids in elementary school in suburban Denver had never made a paper airplane.
Oh my gosh.
That is ridiculous. And paper airplane is in there with one of the projects. Cut out a paper snowflake. Just
to our listeners, the book that Temple is telling us about is called Calling All Kids.
Calling All Minds. It's called
Calling All Minds.
Paperback book version of it's got a yellow cover. It's called Calling All Minds. And I got the outdoor scientist. That's to get kids out looking at animals and stars and
love it.
Rocks and just all kinds of interesting stuff.
There's a foundational curiosity that I feel drives my daughter. And I feel like when curiosity and safety collide, it can feel like the thing that paralyzes that mom in the gate. But when her curiosity and her intellect drive her, I can picture the same, her bolting to the tree or bolting out to have her curiosities met. The same exact thing happening in a different light because of the way that you fulfill your curiosity by exploring. And I just think it's that shift in me will allow my daughter to grow.
Well, that's right. And you start looking at what they can do. There's too much emphasis on the deficit, not enough emphasis on the can do. Now, when I got into 3rd grade, I couldn't read, and my mother and the teacher were really concerned about that. And whole word didn't work for me, but learning with phonics, reading out loud worked for me. Then also get a book that's interesting. Not only Harry Potter, but that's a book that's interesting. It was not interesting.
On the other part of Jamie's heart.
I'm dyslexic, and Harry Potter was like, it was interesting to me. It was the first book I wanted to read it. I was so
wanted to read it. See, that's really important. It was one of the best things that happened to reading. I went to our local Barnes and Noble when they had the midnight opening. I didn't stick around for the midnight opening, but when you see 7-year-olds lugging around a great big huge fat book,
that's something.
That's one of the best things that ever happened to reading.
I wanted to ask, my son is in kindergarten, and I had to go to all these meetings to try and get him the supports in place that he needed. And one thing I was trying to describe to this team of people was that his brain works in photographs, or
that's
that
right.
he needs
that's visual thinking. And then you've got math kids that just see patterns and everything. but my mind works in photographs.
Yeah, and can you describe how like maybe some tips or something that has worked for you along the way in that realm? Because once they put in visual supports for my son, he was off to the running. You know,
yeah,
he didn't.
I cannot remember long strings of verbal information. I need a checklist, bullet points. I mean, now they can be written, but even now, you said, blah, 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 this is how you close out the Walmart cash drawer, I'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
I need to make a checklist.
A checklist. Okay. Yeah, I was trying to explain that to people, and I don't think my perception is, I mean, I do the best I can, but I can't really explain how that looks, I guess, for him, except for that it works better if you put in these visual supports for him, you know. He's
Well, then
gonna,
you do that, and that's
Yeah.
something that's not difficult to do.
right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and my daughter is like a very strong visual learner. She's nonverbal. She does have some words that she's developed in the past couple of years, but before that, she never had words. You know, sometimes she doesn't understand what you say to her. She gets very lost in the more words you use. But like she's very observant and she knows a lot of things that you would not think that were discovering over the last couple of years, all these things that like she knows that I didn't know that she knew the days of the week or the months of the
Yeah.
year. And she does. Like she was able to show me that on her iPad. And it was just kind of one of these things that like just kind of happened, you know, and I'm learning that she knows so much stuff that we never realized because she learns by seeing everything, not necessarily
That's
by
good.
yeah. So it's just very interesting. I actually watched the movie tonight. Me and my husband watched it, and seeing how you or how the character that was you portraying you you know, just saw everything and took everything in,
Well,
you
the
know.
movie shows exactly how I think in pictures.
I mean,
It's accurate.
I just cried so much watching that. It reminds me so much of my daughter. Obviously, she's different. She's not verbal and she doesn't have, you know, she has intellectual disability and stuff. But just like the reactions to things and just how, you know, how hard it is to process the environment for her. And it was such a beautiful movie. And it wasn't necessarily crying sad. It was just, I just get emotional.
Moving.
Yeah, thinking about like just how hard it is for her and stuff. But like when the character went to the room and something was like moved, that's how she is. Like she gets very
And they
up.
I remember when I was a kid, there was a water stain on the ceiling in my bedroom.
Oh,
And I was sure that all the furniture from upstairs was going to fall through the ceiling. It was from a leak in the roof. And
Yeah.
now I know enough about construction to know that the plaster might come off the ceiling. An old house and it was plastered.
but the dresser's not coming through the
But
floor.
the furniture from upstairs wasn't going to go crashing through the ceiling.
Well, it's like you said earlier, how like certain finding the trigger, which sometimes it's very difficult to do, especially like my daughter, when she's upset, it's so much harder for her to understand or express anything. You have to wait till she kind of calms
She's got to
down.
calm down. You got to wait
Yeah.
for her to calm down. Yeah, got to give her a chance to calm down. You can't deal with it when she's in the middle of a meltdown.
Oh yeah, we've learned that a
Got to
long time
have
ago.
time to calm down. Now I had consequences for some temper tantrums. The rule was no television for one night, whether it happened at school or it happened at home. And the only exception to that rule was when it was obviously a loud noise, a big loud noise that caused it, like a
Yeah.
horn on a ferry boat, for example.
But it can be like you said, like the ceiling thing. Like if somebody who can't verbalize something like that, you just wouldn't know that, you know, like it's just, you know, sometimes I think there's these things it's like being a detective, you're looking around, you're trying,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
sometimes
right.
you
That's
realize
right.
something was moved or like,
That's
I
right.
don't know, different things.
Well, this is the other problem we have with autism. Is when the kids get older, there's such a broad spectrum. You got Einstein at one end of the spectrum. He had no language till age 3. He'd land in an autism program today. And then you've got other individual that can't talk and they may have epilepsy on top of the autism and much more severe issues. And it's all got the same name. See, one thing about verbal thinkers is verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize, where visual thinkers think specific. You know, we talk about, I was on a thing the other day, we were talking about helping people with disabilities travel at the airport and places like that. Well, I don't think about that in generalities. Okay, the blind person told me that he hated trying to find gates on the concourse. So I immediately think, well, let's make an app for his phone that will read the gate numbers to him. Gate pointer. You see, that is something specific. That's how my mind works. Not some big broad generality. Let's do something we can actually do.
Yeah.
We have to modify some signs at the airport to make it work. But that's the sort of thing that I don't think in generalities. Let's do something we can actually do.
What's
And
so cool about your path or your story, Temple, is that there's been so much action. It feels very much to me like your mom was a force.
oh,
Your
well, she had a
auntie,
very good idea how much to push me. And I
yes,
call it stretching. She didn't shove me into some sensory thing I wouldn't be able to tolerate. That she didn't do. She had a very good sense of what I could tolerate. But I see too many moms today overprotect their kid. And I don't know how many times this stuff has come up where fully verbal teenagers have never gone shopping by themselves.
yeah,
I mean, this is happening over and over and over again. And I'm finding some of the moms just can't let go when I suggest that their kid should go in a store and buy something by himself, go up and order the food at the McDonald's counter by himself,
yeah,
just doing some of these basic things.
because all of those build on each other.
And I think that's a big part of your new book, is that we need to push our kids to do these things because they contribute to something to society. A lot of
Oh,
other
I tell corporate people, I mean, half those programmers in Silicon Valley are probably on the mathematicians on the spectrum. We need these skills. Who's going to fix stuff like planes and elevators? You
Yeah.
see, my kind of mind, now I'm not going to say I can learn this overnight, but like memorize the entire hydraulic system of an airplane. When I was younger, I would be capable of doing that. It would take me about a year to learn it. But that is just absolute visual thinking.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Well, and then once you know that, then you can see the things that you can tweak to make
Well,
it
you
better.
can kind of see when there's something wrong with it, where
Right.
the problem might be.
Yeah.
Where the innovation and the solution can be.
Well, that's right, because you see it.
Yeah.
And anything, you go check out the people fixing elevators and escalators. You're going to see a lot of gray hair. They're not getting replaced.
Yeah.
Then I see some big fancy dancy building being advertised in New York City, super silvery tower, and I'm going, oh, I hope the elevators work. I hope the water pumps are going to work.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. I watched an interview with you. I'm sorry, I don't know where it was at, but you talked about like looking at animals and how you could see different things that were going on with the animals that someone else couldn't see because of the
lives in a sensory-based world. It's not a word-based world.
Yeah, I found that really interesting. My daughter, we were at my sister's house. She walked outside in the backyard. We were just letting her roam. And then I look out there and she's literally 2 feet from a deer. They are staring each other in the face, just looking at each other. And that would be something that I would be terrified of. She had the most calm, beautiful expression. I was very scared.
Deer got close because he wasn't afraid.
Yes, because he
wasn't
wasn't
a threat.
afraid. He wasn't afraid. And it's something that I see often with both of my kids, is that their demeanor towards animals or nature in itself brings it to them almost like they're one with that space because of the way that their brains work.
On my other books, Animals in Translation, where I talk about how autism and visual thinking help me understand animals, because it's a sensory-based world. They don't live in a word-based world.
Yeah.
And there's a chapter on animal consciousness and visual thinking. And there's still some people that don't think dogs think. And I think it gets down to highly verbal thinkers may have problems imagining how can a dog actually think.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same way I think about going to the grocery store to buy stuff, and I see the big box they have in there that has apples on it. Now I can think about that without words. And then I went in there, they were out of blueberries, so I wasn't so happy about that. But that's something that I see.
Yeah.
And I can go shopping for fruit without any thinking, without any words.
My daughter Celie just started horse therapy, and it isn't riding horse, but it's like therapy in conjunction with these extraordinary animals, and they're out in the pasture together, and the horses are a part of her experience, but there's no guide to them. There's no plan for it. It's just what Celie shows up as and what that horse is experiencing that day. And they walk through their connection for an hour, and it's to build a sense of community and confidence within her
Well,
regulation.
if that's working, then it's something that you do.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of scientists that I know are on the spectrum. You see, autism in its milder forms is personality variant. What
Yeah.
point do you slap a label on it? And what the brain science is showing, it's a true continuous trait. When does nerd become autistic? There's no black and white dividing line.
Yeah.
And then you have such a big range that have very different needs.
Yeah.
And I think, there's a tendency for verbal thinkers, they tend to overgeneralize about things. Okay, how do I teach autistic kids? Well, it's going to be different how you're going to teach a 3-year-old than teach a fully verbal teenager that needs to be working.
Absolutely.
That's a totally different situation.
Right. Yeah.
And we deal with that a lot, I think, in the public school setting or school setting in general, because it's a generalized space where all kids are supposed to be taught in a certain function and formula. And really that doesn't work for a lot of kids, not just autistic kids, but a lot of kids that doesn't really work.
Well, I worked with a lot of people that owned metal fabrication shops. They'd taken a single welding class in high school and they started out with a welder on the back of a truck. And then the business just grew, and then they got a small shop, then they got a big shop, and
Yeah.
One thing at a time, one stretch at a
visual
time.
thinking, when they figure out how mechanical things work, is a different kind of thinking. You just see how it works.
For instance, my husband, he's not an academic person at all, but he can fix anything. He can look at it, figure it out. Like I can't do that. It's everybody's so different in the way they learn. So some people just really learn hands-on, really like looking at things, putting things. I can't put anything together. I'm not one of those people, but just figuring things out, and that's where their strength is.
Different kind of thinking, and either mathematical thinking or word thinking. And I tell corporate people that the first thing they need to understand is different thinking exists. Then they bring different kinds of skills. Like when I worked on the visual thinking book, I would do the rough drafts, but they'd be kind of disorganized. Betsy, my very verbal co-author, would smooth them all out, rearrange stuff. She was just magical how she did that. So we're using our complementary skills. That's what we were doing.
Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about the book?
Well, in the first part of the visual thinking book, I talk about skill loss. I already talked about that. Then I have a whole chapter just on the science, because some people say, well, maybe this is just conjecture. It's not really true. But there's a whole lot of science where there's been experiments with object visualizers and then the mathematical visual spatials, see where the skills are different. Bunch of science. Then I have a chapter called Screened Out, where I talk about kids that can't do algebra, can't graduate from high school, going nowhere. Then there's a chapter on neurodiversity that originally started in the autism community. And then there's a whole chapter on disasters and how visual thinking could have prevented messes like Fukushima, because mathematicians calculate risk. Visual thinkers like me go, well, why didn't you put watertight doors on it to protect the electric emergency cooling pump?
Yeah.
I just see it. I just see it.
Yeah.
Electric pumps don't run underwater, and all I know about that reactor is I need that pump really badly to prevent a meltdown.
Get me a bigger
I'm
gasket,
really in
people.
trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see, you just see it, and then there's a chapter on animal consciousness. So that but there's also a lot of information in there on jobs for different kinds of thinkers, because that's something that I want to see these kids get into good careers.
Yeah.
For my kind of mind, skilled trades is a good way to go. But for the mathematical kid, it'd be computer science and maybe music, maybe chemistry, lots of math and that. There's things where you need algebra, but I'm concerned that all these math requirements are screening out my kind of mind.
Right.
And what would I do if I was in California and I couldn't graduate from high school? Well, there's a back door, and I've seen it happen all the time in the meat industry. Somebody comes in, gets a job on the line. Next thing you know, they're in the maintenance shop. The next thing you know, they're in charge of the new plant addition. I have seen that way of doing things. And somebody gets a job at an Amazon warehouse, and then they end up designing the next one. Good things where you learn on the job.
And there's a value in that, but I think that as society, we need to put more value in that plan and that path, because so much has been cut out. And I think,
Well,
like
I
you
can't
talked
believe
about,
the
it's
things that
from,
people say, well, a car is just a rolling computer. No, it's a machine controlled by a computer.
Right.
Same thing with a 3D printer. It's a mechanical device controlled by a computer, not just a rolling computer.
Right.
It's just ridiculous to say that.
Well, in Temple, in reading your book, I have recommended it to like 5 people already who I'm like, hey, you should read this book. I think it will help you understand yourself. Like so many, I immediately understand who visual thinkers were. And you
Mhm.
talked about the different types of visual thinkers, but I highly recommend the book to
Well,
anyone.
thank you. I really appreciate that.
It's really good. And I was like examining myself from it, like, okay, where do I fit? And
Well,
it's just,
that's right. And a lot of people are mixtures. And I didn't realize that verbal thinking existed until I was in my 30s.
Mm.
And that was a shock for me.
I've heard you share that story or I've heard your story shared in that regard. And it's just such an eye opener to imagine, like it opens up a whole new world to think that other people are this way, but
There's
also
a lot of people that don't know that other people think differently. You know, they
Mhm.
talk about artists and accountants don't get along. Well, I think some of this gets down to how they think. And when
Mhm.
you understand how they think, then they can get along better and they can figure out how they can use the skills in a complementary manner.
it made me really think about how my daughter has language and she knows that she's autistic and she has lots of role models, women that are autistic. We're sitting with one. And it's been cool to watch her have the power within that and know that she might come up with a different solution to a problem that somebody else might not see. There's such a sense of empowerment in her. And I feel like that's a lot to do with how we've described things to her and really who she is as a person. But can you speak a little bit about how the label has and how your diagnosis, how you kind of harness that power as a power and not as
Well,
the parts you can't do?
you know, where I'm seeing like an adult that gets diagnosed later on in life,
Yeah.
that gives insight into relationships. And a lot of people feel relief. But on the other hand, you take on the fully verbal end of the spectrum, I'm seeing too many kids, I think, getting held back by the label. And they're not getting out and working and the parents overprotect them.
Yeah.
Now, there's some jobs I want to avoid. McDonald's takeout window, I want to avoid that. That's multitasking horribleness.
Oh,
I
yeah.
want to avoid Christmas stores during the holidays, things like that. Just
Yeah.
that kind of chaos I want to avoid.
Yeah.
Because that'd be the multitasking, that'd be setting them up for failure. But on the other hand, you've got to get them out doing things. I'll tell you what one McDonald's did, just working in the neighborhood with an autistic girl. She ran the cash register, but when the store got really busy, they had her clean tables.
Love it.
Now it's just a very simple little thing that when the cash register got too hectic, they took her off of it. Now that's easy. These are the sort of simple things we need to be doing.
Yeah.
It's
Easy
real
accommodation
simple.
to help someone be successful.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. And when the store's busy, they need somebody to clean the tables.
Yeah.
And it can get overwhelming. I used to work at McDonald's, so I know.
Temple, we want to thank you so much for your time and your work, mostly for your work and your time. I just can't express how much your work has meant to each of the 5 of us. I just
Well,
am so
thank you
grateful.
so
and to all of
much.
our listeners.
And thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us. What an honor. Thank
It was
you.
great to join you. And thank you for having me.
Yes.
Have
you,
a
Temple.
wonderful
Thank
evening.
you.
I will. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for joining us at the table for this interview with Temple Grandin. Make sure to check out her book, Visual Thinking: The Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. You can find the link in the description of this episode. In there, you can also find where to sign up for our newsletter and how to become a supporter. Join us next Monday for another episode. But while you wait, make sure to check out our content on Facebook and Instagram. If you are enjoying the podcast, please make sure to subscribe and rate and review us wherever you listen. To contact us, you can email us at tablefor5podcast@gmail.com. We can't wait to sit with you again.